What's up, you amazing hackers? I hope you're all doing well. Welcome to OWASP Chandigarh. It's great having you here. We're going to have an awesome talk about how to get started in bug bounties, and we're going to tell you guys a bit about logic flaws. Let's get right into it, shall we? Now, the first thing I want to tell you guys is how to get started into bug bounties. There are a couple of things that you really need to know if you want to get started in bug bounties. Now, the first thing I would really recommend that you do is get some basic knowledge built up. It's really important that you have some of the basics down, because you're going to need them later on, and we're going to not just use them, but you're going to use them in an out-of-the-box way. You're going to have to think creatively. So it's very important that you know these basics. Let's get right into how you can get some basic knowledge first. So first things first, some basic knowledge that you can gain is, of course, the OWASP Top 10. I really recommend that you go through this, that you read it, that you look at it. It's very important that you know some of the top vulnerabilities that are out there, and it's really important that you have a good basic understanding. Now, once you've gone through that, there's also an extension I would like to recommend. Of course, you can also download the OWASP Top 10 in here, and that's a really interesting document. I would highly recommend that you guys go through that one. But there's also the OWASP API Security Top 10. Now, API security, in my opinion, is a much bigger problem than just front-end protection. I'm going to give you guys some technical details here, and you have in a modern application, you have several layers. Now, there's going to be a backend. There's probably going to be some kind of communication layer. That's your API. And then there's going to be some front-end layer, like Angular or whatever, Vue.js. You can put a lot of things on there. Now, all of those front-end validations, you have a ton of front-end validations that prevent you from entering any cross-site scripting things, that prevent you from entering any SSTI attack vectors. Now, those things are all created to protect the user from their own stupidity. A real hacker doesn't care about all of those front-end validations. Of course, there are some really good juicy vulnerabilities that have not been found yet in all of these frameworks, because they're so new and there's so much stuff to go through. So if you really want to get into some modern, newer technology hacking, you can always look at that. But if you really want to get into bug bounties, I would highly recommend that you focus more on the API layer. The API layer is a very important part, because there, of course, you're also going to need protection. That's what your hacker is going to talk to. Now, in my opinion, of course, this differs for everybody, but in my opinion, a hacker is just somebody that knows how to use tools like a developer does, but knows how to use them in a different, unique, out-of-the-box way. Now, I'm saying out-of-the-box often. You guys will know why later on. But the OWASP Top 10 security is a really good one. We'll quickly go through each of these vulnerabilities. Broken object level authorization. APIs tend to expose endpoints that handle object identifiers, creating a wide attack surface level access control issue. Object level authorization checks should be considered in every function that accesses a data source using an input from a user. Then, of course, there's also broken user authentication. Authentication mechanisms that are often implemented incorrectly. Now, these are really interesting vulnerabilities. Excessive data exposure is also a really interesting one. You guys can go through each and every single one of them on your own. I would highly recommend that you do. But of course, there's also, and I'm going to scroll up a little bit here, if you go to downloads, you can also download a PDF that's going to contain some more information. And again, I highly recommend you going through these, because the API is the beginning for every hacker. Now, a lot of tools that you're going to be using are going to be focused on that API, especially if you really like doing this kind of stuff like API testing. And there's going to be different types of testing that you can do, of course. We'll go over those later. But if you really like the API testing, there's different tools that you can use, like Postman, like Swagger, like SOAP UI. There's going to be different tools. And you're going to be getting familiar with each and every one of those when you get your hands dirty. Now, when you have all of this basic knowledge down, when you know all of these vulnerabilities and what they are. Of course, it's really important that you do your own research into them, get some basics down, but you can practice them later on, of course, on the OWASP Juice Shop. Now, in here, you can, of course, there's like a how to get started, so it will help you get started a little bit. But here you can practice all of these vulnerabilities. And if you're really stuck on this Juice Shop, like just Google OWASP Juice Shop, by the way, to know how to get to install this. You can install it on a Heroku app. You can run it via Docker. You can run it like normally. There are so many different options that I would highly recommend that you look into that yourself, like how do you want to run it. And then here you can test some of these vulnerabilities out and see if you can find them. Now it's going to be very basic in here, and that's something that's really important and I want to give to you guys. All of the vulnerabilities that you find in the Juice Shop, they're going to be pretty like surface attack levels. I'm going to give you guys an example of this. Like if I put my image tags in here, like I do right now, image sourced equals X, and then on error, like I'm going to put my event handler in here on error equals alert. Like this type of vulnerability is something that you're never going to find in real life, you know. There are scanners for this, there are many different tools that find these vulnerabilities, and it's just not something that's really common in real life. But you're going to need this knowledge. It's super important that you get your basics right. Now I'm going to give you guys like a martial arts comparison. In martial arts, I'm not afraid of a person who practiced 10,000 kicks, but I'm afraid of a person who practice one kick 10,000 times, you know. Like it's really important to get your basics correct and down, and then you can start looking at how to exploit this further. Like this image source equals X on error is alert. It's really important that you know what's happening here. If you don't know what's happening, just look it up, you know. And if you find some words, this is very important. Like a lot of people have asked me if I have a vulnerability and I don't know like what it is, or like I want to know how cross-site scripting works, but I go and do some research and I don't know how to do my research. I get stuck very often. Well, for me, research is pretty simple. It's like you go and you Google your first terms like cross-site scripting, and then you look at what's happening, and then you write down all of the words that you don't understand, and you Google them one by one, and that way you get to know the application, like the vulnerability, a bit more step by step. But you also learn how to do better research, because like it's super hard to do good research. You guys probably already know this. You guys have done all of this research. Some of you have. It's super important that you get this research part right. So like if you find this vulnerability, okay, you look into it a little bit more, if you want to test it, and you get very deep into how it works, because again, you're not going to find surface level attacks like this. Now, when you get those basics down, we're going to move on to the next step here, guys. When you get those basics down, you're going to look for different attack surfaces. Now, I'm using the search page here, and I'm using the parameter queue. Now, you can use different tools to brute force those parameters. For example, maybe there's a different parameter f. Like I'm going to give you guys a very stupid example. Right now my parameter is q, but what if my parameter is f also exists, but there's no way to access this in the UI? So for this you can use tools like Aryan, and you're going to find different parameters that are not nowhere in this page, you know, that you cannot easily find. Or you can just go and look into the JavaScript and find some parameters there. Now you can open the developer console for that real quickly. Just open the developer console. Let's see here, inspect element, let's do this. And then here, of course, you can look at the page source and look at all of the JavaScript, extract them, and then you're going to have to look further, like cross-site scripting, you know what cross-site scripting is, okay. You can find different parameters on different pages, but how do you do that? Well, you have your tools like Aryan. You can look at your JavaScript files with other tools like Link Finder, like Secret Finder, all of these different tools. They're going to help you find different and hidden endpoints. And maybe some Google dorking will also be helpful. Now, if you want to get some more basic information for that, I also created a security a hunting test, sorry guys, a checklist, of course. Now, in this checklist, I put out a strategy for you guys, so you guys can get down and dirty with like bug bounty hunting, and you guys can get some like your feet wet. If you really want to get started in bug bounty hunting, and this is one of the most important things, just do it. Just start. You're going to have to make mistakes. Every single one of us bug bounty hunters that have found vulnerabilities that are successful, every single one of us makes a lot of mistakes. But that's okay. All of those mistakes are just a different word for experience. So you're going to have to make those mistakes, and it's all about hard work. Like, basically, it's the only thing that you have to do is work very hard. Of course, you have to have a little bit of a brain, but I think everybody watching does. You guys are pretty much amazing. So when you want to get down and dirty with bug bounty hunting, just do it. Just start. Make sure that you are aware that you're going to fail. I'm going to give you guys some more tips on that later, but it's really important that you just do it, you know. It's like with everything in life, if you want to get experience, you have to make those mistakes. Now on to the next subject, and this is really cool for me. It's like, how do you pick your bug bounty platform? That's something that's really interesting to me, because there are many different advantages and disadvantages to every single platform. We're going to go over some of the major ones. Now, if you really want to do some bug bounty hunting, you don't know what platform to pick, there are a couple of ones you can pick from. Of course, Integrity is one of the major ones in Europe. You have Bugcrowd, you have HackerOne, you have Yes We Hack. But of course, you can also look for your own bug bounty program, and for that I always look to Sushi Wushi's that's a cool name, by the way, bug bounty dorks list. So in here you can find some Google dorks which will help you find responsible disclosure programs, and I really like this one, in URL responsible disclosure bounty. Now, why do I like it so much? Because hopefully it will lead to some responsible disclosure programs that give you guys some bounty. Now, these dorks are where I would start. I would start looking at websites that haven't gotten a lot of traffic yet, and this is an important distinction between all of the bug bounty platforms. Let's go over Integrity first. For Integrity, you're going to see that you don't have as much hackers, as much competition as Bugcrowd or HackerOne, one of the bigger platforms. Same goes for Yes We Hack. You're not going to have the same amount of you're not going to have the same amount of competition everywhere. Yes We Hack and Integrity are somewhat of a lower competition. But that also means that you have more chance to find a bug, of course. Now, for Bugcrowd, they have a lot more programs on there, which means you have a lot more choice of your target. So if you want to get some more targets, if you are not sure which target to get, of course you can try any of these platforms. It's really like up to you which one you want to pick, but I would really start with the bug bounty dorks. Now, as for which program to pick, that's going to be a lot harder. You can pick any bug bounty platform and just start. You can pick any responsible disclosure program and just start. But for a program, I always say that a program has to fit like you. I don't know if you guys watched Harry Potter, but in Harry Potter, the wand chooses its wizard. And I always say that the program has to pick you as much as you have to pick the program. There are many different aspects to picking a program. But one important distinction is which type of tester you want to be. In my opinion, there are different types of testers. There's like the tester that goes for the functional bugs, which is people like me. I go mostly for logic flaws. I hammer the main app. I kind of got my inspiration from Stuck There. Like, I know you guys probably know him. I did an interview with him on my channel. Like, that guy is amazing, and he taught me to always go for the main application. Like, that's one of the things I really like doing, because I'm also a QA engineer and I really like software testing, so it really helps in this, of course. And I also met Inti from Integrity, and that guy, he told me that, like, if you really want to be successful, all you have to do is read the manual. And a cool story about that, guys, later on in the logic flaws, like, reading the manual is a really important part of it. And I also told you guys in the previous section that reading the JavaScript file is really important. You can run tools on the JavaScript file, but I always say also look at it manually. Read the JavaScript file, and somebody asked me, how much time do you actually spend reading the JavaScript file? And for me it's simple. I'm done until I've read everything that there is to read. And if there is like a function that I don't understand, I just skip it for now. Maybe I'll understand it later, but I have to understand like most of the JavaScript. That's really important for me. I'm telling you guys, JavaScript files are a gold mine, so take the time to read through them. That's really important. Now, on the other hand, you can also have the more technical testers. Of course, they also like the more technical testers will look for SSRF vulnerabilities. They will look for really cool CVEs that you can exploit until you get root on a system. And that's really awesome. I've done my OSCP as well. It's not what I want to do. It's not what I want to do. You know, it's possible I can do it, but it's not where I want to go with my life. That's why I usually focus on the logic flaws. More on that later on. Now on to the next section, of course, not on to the next section. I mean, we are still in what program to pick. What program to pick? I've got a couple here open. These are from Integrity. This is not a sponsorship. I am not affiliated with them. It's just purely because I know Integrity like my home. I really enjoy hacking for them, but it's like the only platform I hack for at the moment. When I have done all of the scope on Integrity, of course I'll move on to HackerOne or Bugcrowd. Right now we're doing some HackerOne, but we've mostly been doing Integrity, so I know all of the programs on there, and I can recommend you guys some of them. Now, first of all, Fished is a really cool program. As you can see, it has a start.fished.be scope, and they are responsible disclosure. It's really important. Now I'll go over this real quick. Responsible disclosure means that you do not get any bounty. I highly recommend that you guys go for a responsible disclosure program. Why is this? First of all, you're not getting paid. So that's a really important part. A lot of hackers are going to say, no, I don't care about responsible disclosure. I just want to get paid. I want to get money for my actions. Okay, so a couple of notes there. That's going to drastically reduce the amount of hackers on the program, first of all. Second of all, some programs actually give bonuses if you have like important vulnerabilities. That's really cool to know as well. So you have here, this one is a responsible disclosure. I don't know if this one gives bonuses, but we'll go over one that certainly does. And it's also really important that responsible disclosure means that you're like how shall I put this, that you're like surrounded by less hackers, but you're also more likely to get a bigger scope, like a broader domain that is in scope. And here we have star.fish.be that may not seem like a large domain, but maybe they have like a ton of subdomains. You don't know that. So This one is a program that I would go for if you like hammering the main app though, because I've been through this program and fished.be has a pretty good main application. I'm not the kind of guy that will do recon. We'll go over recon later because I do have some tips and tricks for you guys there. I've done it before. I still do it from time to time, but it's not my favorite. I'll put it that way. It's like, oh, I'm bored, I'll do some recon. Alright, so what's really important is that you're always going to have an in-scope section and an out-of-scope section. Read these carefully, guys. I cannot emphasize this enough. You have to read your in and out-of-scope sections carefully. I made a mistake recently where I reported a blind cross-site scripting attack, but it was not in scope because the domain was not in scope, and I was an idiot before because I was not reading that. Sorry, I did read it actually, but I didn't remember it, so that's my fault. I was an idiot. I should probably really read the out of scope page. There's also a rules of engagement. Read these carefully. In HackerOne and in background, these pages might look a little bit differently, but you're mostly going to have the same sort of style, same sort of thing on the page. There's also going to be a severity assessment on integrity and an FAQ, so read these pages very carefully, guys. That's very important for you. Now on to the next program, Hoppler. This one is also pretty cool because it has a very broad scope, as you guys can see, but it also has some apps in store. So it has the Android and the iOS app, and you guys can test that as well. Why would I recommend that? It's really like, this is a little bit more advanced, but I would highly recommend that you look into Android hacking as well. Like, Android hacking is pretty easy. It's not super hard, not like iOS hacking in any way. And if you want to hack on Android, there's going to be again less competition. So as you guys noticed, I've been emphasizing less competition. It's really important that you cut down on your competition in the beginning, because you don't want to go through a super hardened target. And you want to have a broad scope, because that broad scope is going to allow you to find like subdomains or domains that have not been tested by people before. There are a couple of techniques you can use for that, which we'll go over later. But again, here, really cool. Also read the out of scope and in scope sections. Would recommend. Now for Randstad, of course, what I would like to say is that these guys might give you a bonus. I cannot guarantee it, but I have gotten a bonus from them from reporting a vulnerability. So it's really important that you guys check, first of all, the scope. In here, it's going to be massive. star.randstad.star. You guys probably know Randstad from your own country. These guys are probably everywhere, and you're going to have a good time trying to find all of the subdomains. We'll go through Recon later on. And Port of Antwerp, of course, this is also one I recommend because of the giant scope. Now we'll move on to the next section real quick, which is Recon. And this is something really cool. For Recon, I'm not the guy to go to. I would probably recommend Jason Haddix. Jason Haddix has a really cool, like, he has both on his GitHub, he has a repository which you guys can look at, like, if you don't want to look at the video. He also has How Do I Shot Web as a PDF available for us. That's really cool of him. And he also has it in video form, which is freaking awesome. I would highly recommend that you guys go and check it out. Now, as for what I would do for Recon, I have a couple of things that I would really recommend. Of course, you need to do subdomain enumeration. You really need to know what subdomains do I have to play with here, and there are a couple of tools you can use for that. Of course, here are the tools. You guys can go and download them if you want. This is for multi-target Recon. This is on my own repository. This is on /security testing, as you guys can see over here. Now, if you found all of the subdomains, check if the subdomains are live, of course. Use TomNom's HTTP probe for that. If you don't have HTTP probe, optional for HTTP probe if you don't have HTTPS in front of the subdomains. That's something pretty important. Like, you have to configure your tools correctly, of course. Subdomain flyover is something I would do next. So you go and enumerate all of your domains. You check if they are live with HTTP probe. Then you do some subdomain flyover. This is also really important. If you want to get some screenshots of all of these cool subdomains, you can use Eyewitness or Aquatone for that. Of course, some vulnerability scanners. It's always like a good idea to run these. You have Nicto, of course, but you also have Nuclei, and I have my own script, but that's not nearly as good as any of the others. Like, I would highly recommend you guys look into Nuclei or Nicto. That's really a good one to look at. As for directory brute forcing, that's also really important. A giant tip I can give you guys there is that you have to directory brute force all of the login pages. Like, if you find a login page, usually there is something behind there, and sometimes those login pages might not be correctly protected, and you might get some pages that you're not supposed to see behind like a login page, and that might be a big vulnerability to the company. That's some side notes I want to make later on. The company might decide that the impact might be high or low. That's up to the company, but we'll go deeper into that later on. Now, of course, you can use GoBuster. Burp Pro Content Discovery is pretty good for this. You have FUF and you have their search. I don't know, OWASP Sub also has it, of course, content discovery, so you can use that. JavaScript analysis, these are the tools I was talking about. You can use Link Finder or Get All URLs. And of course, Secret Finder as well. I have to put that in there. And if you really want, you can also do some port scanning. Now, this is some more advanced stuff, so I wouldn't recommend the port scanning for people who are just starting out. A quick side note I would like to make is that impact really determines everything. Impact is super important. Now, impact is purely determined by the company's needs. I'm going to give you guys an example. Say, for example, that there are two companies and they are both in a bug bounty program. One company sells shoes. The other company is a bank. Now, as a tester, you find exactly the same vulnerability in both applications, which is that you can get more orders than you are supposed to. In the bank, you can order some dividends. So you can order some, let's say you can order bags of money, for example. And in the shoe store, you can order shoes, of course. But let's say you can order 20 shoes while only paying for 2 shoes, and you can also order 20 bags of gold while only paying for 2 of those. Of course, for the shoe store, that's going to have a pretty high vulnerability, that's going to have a pretty high impact. But for your bank, that's going to be a freaking disaster, because if people can just take away money, more money than they put in, that's not going to be good at all. So what you have to do is always think in terms of the company. Like, if I was the company, how would this vulnerability impact me? That's very important that you always keep that in mind. So we'll move on to the next section, which is business logic vulnerabilities. And these are my freaking favorite, guys. I love them so much. It's incredible. As for the business logic vulnerabilities, I would highly recommend that you read from OWASP their story. So they have a really good description and risk factors, of course, and some important links here. And of course, they also I would highly recommend that you look at the Portswigger labs. Sorry, guys. So Portswigger Academy has some really good labs on business logic vulnerabilities if you want to try them yourself. I'm going to start by giving out some examples for you guys. Now, as an example, let's say you are an administrator and you're creating your manual, you're putting in your manual like administrators cannot delete other administrators. Like, that's a rule, it's put in the manual. And you are a penetration tester one day, you come by, you start testing their website, and you notice that they have a manual. guys, read that freaking manual, and if the manual tells you that you cannot do something, try and do it. It's really important, and I don't mean try and just go to the UI and do that. I mean actually do that, that's very important, that you actually do it. So back to the story. Let's say you are your penetration tester, you come by, you read that manual, just try it, just try to deactivate another admin, create 2 admins, log into the other admin and try to delete the first administrator. If you can do that, that's of course a vulnerability, because that logic is written in the manual to make sure that administrators cannot delete other administrators, that the one administrator cannot go rogue. So another example I have for you guys, let's say you order 99 items that cost $100. Suddenly you notice in your basket that your price has gone down to minus 100,000. So you order 99 more of that item, and suddenly you are at -1. Say for example, your price is at -1, and you're like, oh, that's really cool, I get $1 back. You try to order it, of course, but when you start ordering, it says you cannot order if you have a negative price. Okay, so you're like, okay, I have 2 times 99 of that item in my basket. What can I do? Well, let's try to add 1 more. So then your price suddenly becomes positive again, and that positive price is going to allow you to order, but it's not going to let you order 1 shoe. It's going to let you order 2 times 99 shoes and then another shoe. That's crazy, you guys. So these vulnerabilities, you will all find them in the Portrigger labs. If you want to go deeper into them, of course, go through them. This is really good stuff, guys. I highly appreciate that Portrigger did this for us. Another example I have for you guys is a CAPTCHA bypass. Say you're a website programmer and you have your front end, and the front end implements like a Java, like a CAPTCHA control, and you have to communicate with an API that the CAPTCHA response is X, Y, or Z. So you go into the application, you try to log in, and the CAPTCHA, you just leave it empty. You don't fill it in. You just press send. And let's say it does return a response. In that case, you also have a good vulnerability, because that CAPTCHA is supposed to be there to protect people from brute forcing the website. If the CAPTCHA doesn't work, if you can send an empty parameter for the CAPTCHA and the request, and you do get a response back from the API, that means that several mechanisms have failed and they are not checking that key correctly, that CAPTCHA key. So if you can do that, you have a CAPTCHA bypass. Now, why would you look for logic flaws? Why would you look for business logic vulnerabilities? Several reasons. They cannot easily be automated. This is one of the most important reasons for me. The robots are going to take over a lot of things in the future, guys. You guys probably already know that. But these are one of the things that are really hard for a robot to detect, because the implementation of a robot, it can only do what a human tells it to do. And these business logic vulnerabilities are super hard to find. They're basically invisible unless you are looking for them. So why are they invisible, you might ask yourself? Like, what kind of a person is going to order 99 shoes and then order 99 more and then order another one just to be in the positive? It's not like these things happen by accident, you really have to start looking for them. They can be very diverse. They can be in several different places. There are just a ton of different places that these can occur. They can occur in your security mechanisms. They can occur in your payment walls. They can occur in so many different places. So that's why it's so interesting to look for your business logic vulnerabilities. The impact can go from trivial to exceptionally high. Like again, the example for the bank, if you can order much more gold than you actually put money in for, that's going to be a giant vulnerability. While if you can order more shoes than you are supposed to, okay, those shoes might get delivered to you, it's messed up, but it's not nearly as important as you getting a ton of gold, while you're not supposed to. And that's something I would really like to get, by the way, guys. A ton of gold, that sounds really cool. So it really depends on the functionality, it really depends on where your vulnerability occurs, what the impact is going to be. And that's pretty much all I have to say for you guys. I really hope you enjoyed this talk. I really enjoyed making it. Thank you guys so much for the OWASP, for making this presentation possible. I really appreciate it that everybody was listening until this point. Thank you guys very much. If you want to see more of me, my name is the thexssrat on YouTube. It's been my pleasure to have you here, and thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye, everybody.